Hi everyone. So today we're going to do a little review on what is supply. I'm going to split this into two different videos, even though it's one chapter in the textbook. I'm going to start out with just supply and talking about the law of supply, defining supply, supply schedules, and the supply curve. And then next video, we'll get into shifting supply, supply versus quantity supplied, and also the elasticity of supply. Okay, so we'll split this into two videos. The basics will be in here, and then we'll shift the curve in the next video. So, starting out with supply, you may be wondering, what is supply? And hopefully we've got this from the textbook chapter, so it's just some review. But supply is the willingness of producers or firms, okay, firms means businesses in economics, or firms to produce goods at a given price point. All right, the willingness of producers or firms to produce goods at a given price point. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, A, what are firms? Again, firms are just businesses. And B, this word willingness, okay? So willingness in economics is very important because we assume in economics that it's the study of people and choices, the decisions people make in a free market, okay? So just like when we talked about demand, we were talking about the willingness of people to buy different items at different prices. Here, we're talking about the willingness of producers or stores or businesses or firms to supply items at different prices. Okay, so left to their own willingness, not forced, what are they willing to do? And that's supply and demand in a free market economy. Okay, so that's the backdrop with which we'll study supply. And now it's time to look into the law of supply. Okay, so the law of supply, it's actually very simple. The law of demand, of course, as we already studied last week, is when price of a good or service increases, the quantity demanded decreases. The law of supply is exactly the opposite. As price increases, quantity supplied increases also. All right, as price increases, quantity supplied increases. They have a direct relationship when we're talking about supply. They have an inverse relationship when we're talking about demand. All right, so you may be wondering why that is, and I'm going to give you an example. So when we talk about supply, I find that a good first example is to talk about farmers. All right, let's talk about a farmer who has this plot of land. Okay, and every year that farmer can choose to plant blueberries and strawberries, both grow in the same climate. The farmer could simply buy seeds for one or the other. They're going to plant them in March. They're going to be growing, in spring and over the summer. And what is going to influence the farmer's decision making? Well, the number one thing that's going to influence the farmer's decision making of how many blueberries and how many strawberries to produce is what are the prices that farmer will get for each item. So let's say that blueberries and strawberries are selling at the same price, okay? This farmer can produce barrels of blueberries and strawberries, sell them each for $100 a barrel, like big barrel of strawberries, big barrel of blueberries, same price. Then that farmer may simply just cut her farm down the middle and produce blueberries over here and strawberries over here, right? And let's say though that one season, blueberries are selling for $200 per barrel, and strawberries are selling for just $75 a barrel. Maybe it comes out that blueberries are particularly healthy for you. Putting blueberries in your cereal, even at breakfast, can drastically improve your health, where strawberries, unfortunately, not so much. Okay, let's say that came out. So blueberries are selling at a higher price now. This farmer, this season, if this came out in January, is going to take note of that, of course. And what do you think they're going to do? Well, it's pretty intuitive, isn't it? This farmer is probably, use the blue here, farmer is probably going to split his or her farm like this and produce strawberries over here and blueberries over here, like 90% blueberries, 10% strawberries, right? Why? Because the farmer would rather make $200 a barrel for the berries than $75 a barrel for the berries, right? And if you're thinking in the back of your mind, wait, but at some point, if every farmer does this, wouldn't that just decrease the price of blueberries eventually? Yes, it likely would, and that's why markets are sort of self-correcting in this way. But in the short term, when this information comes out and the price is now $200, farmers and other firms are going to try to produce as many of the higher priced good as possible in order to make more money and get more bang for their buck, so to speak, right? You'd rather plant crops that are going to sell at a higher price than crops that are going to sell at a lower price, okay? Similarly, if a particular shoe is very popular and therefore selling at a high price, every Foot Locker in the area is going to try to get their hands on that shoe, right? I don't want an equal amount of the brand new Jordans as I do the new, Reebok shoes. I don't want an equal number of them. I want way more Nikes. Why? Because they're selling for a higher price. You're going to make more money on them per sale, right? So firms are willing to supply more of the higher priced item, the best they can at least. Okay, so let's plot this on a curve. Plot this on the graph here. So first of all, there's something called the supply schedule and something called the supply curve. Okay, the supply schedule we'll put over here, and the supply curve we'll put over here. Okay, so the supply curve is going to be on a graph, right? And the supply schedule is going to be on a chart. That's literally the only difference. They give you the exact same information. You're just looking at it in different ways, okay? So this might be price, right? We'll use a dollar sign, right? Price. And then over here, we'll have quantity supplied. And we'll have $1, $2, $3, $4. And the quantity supplied would go up each time, right? At $1, the supplier is willing to produce 10, then 20, then 30, and then 40. Remember when we did this in class a couple weeks ago? I said everyone had a certain number of donuts, and you could sell them at different prices. And obviously, people were more willing to sell their donuts the higher the price went. That's exactly what a supply schedule is. Now, if we were to graph this on a graph, obviously, hopefully we can see here that it would look like this, right? The slope would be upward. We'd label it supply 1. We have quantity down here. We have price up here. And you'll notice that this is just the opposite way that the demand curve worked, right? The demand curve sloped downward. The supply curve slopes upward. And pretty soon we'll combine them probably next week, okay? So, again, this is the exact same information. The point 1 and 10 is just right here on the graph. And then 220, and then 330, and then 440. And if you kept going, it would just be all along this same graph. Supply schedule, supply curve. Again, the supply curve always slopes upward, and the reason is because as the price goes up, more suppliers are willing to supply the item, right? Direct relationship. All right. Hopefully that answers your basic questions about supply. And again, in the next video, we'll talk about elasticity of supply and shifting the supply curve.